We're waiting to get to exactly top of the hour before we get started, but welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. In today's presentation, we're going to go over how to file your own trademark application. Now, there are a couple of types of trademarks, and I will go over that before we get started. So there are basically two types of trademarks you can file. You can file for protection of a mark that you plan to use but are not currently using. Those are called intent to use. And we've done a video on how to file an intent to use trademark application. This one is for filing when you're actually using the trademark. So this is an actual use trademark application. And there's a difference between the two because the intent to use is an indication to the trademark office that you plan to use it, but you're not actually using it, which means you don't have specific specimens that show you using the mark. Whereas an actual use will require you to submit specimens. Before we get into the details, I'm going to be sharing my screen. So hopefully you can see the details. And if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat. Nicole, who's with us here today, is going to monitor the chat. And then as the questions come up, she'll present them to me. Also, if you're doing it through live stream, if you present your chats your questions on Facebook, Nicole can monitor it and get into it. So I'm going to share my screen right now so everybody can see what I've got up. And this screen, as soon as everybody can see it, I'm going to go over it. Let me give it a second because sometimes it takes a minute for it to load up. Nicole, can everybody see this? Can you see this now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. So right now I'm on the first page of the trademark application process. If you take a close look, it's got a bunch of questions. Now, the first question everyone's asking me is, how did you get to this page? So I'll back up 1 second and give you an idea. So you go to uspto.gov. And then when you get to the uspto.gov, there is a trademark tab, and what you're looking for is this tab right here, the TAS trademark filing and form. So you just click on that. It will bring you to this next page, which says apply online. The one tab you want to click is this one, the initial application form. All of these other tabs are for after you file your application and you're going to deal with the trademark office directly. So you click on that one, it takes you to another page, and right here, when you click this page, it will take you to the page I'm on. So I'm not going to click it because I'm already on that page, but it also gives you the various different types of applications you can file. There are two different ones that you can file for each of the intent to use or actual use. One is a TAS plus, and the other one's a TAS standard. The difference is in the fee. One is a $250 fee. The other is a $350 fee. This is actually shown on the page right here. So as you can see, you can click the radio button for TAS plus or the radio button for TAS standard. And what is the difference between these two, and why is there a $100 difference in the fee? The TAS plus application forces you to select from predefined or pre-written description of the goods or the services, whereas the TAS standard allows you to custom write your own description of goods or services. And for the most part, you should be able to use the TAS plus. Occasionally, you have to use the TAS standard because the way your goods and services are described are very unique or different, so there's no standard classification for it. So you would collect one of these two. Let's start with the TAS plus, which is the cheaper filing fee. The questions they ask are all identical with the one exception, which I'll highlight for you when we get to that point. The next question they're asking is an attorney filing this application? And again, this question is about representation. So if an attorney is representing you and you're filing it, then you would click yes. If you're an attorney and you're filing your own application, you can click no, or if you're an individual and you're not an attorney, you can click no. As you notice, the minute you do that, they give you a recommendation. They say, we recommend you review the materials on this page before completing your application, because there are certain things that you put into this application that cannot be changed later. And there are other things that you put in this application which limit your trademark registration or affect your rights. So we're going to say yes to this because an attorney is representing us. And going back up here to the various questions at the top, keep in mind this following. There are a bunch of different statements they provide to you. One of the more important ones is, once the actual form loads, this is number 4, everything marked with a red asterisk has to be completed. Then you do validating the form, which is at the end, I will show you. And also please note that say, once you submit this, you can't cancel it or get your fees refunded. So once you submit it, it's done. There's not much you can do in terms of getting your money back or changing your mind. Here are some numbers they give you if you want to call the trademark office. And then this is important, this timeout warning, which we could potentially run into because it says after 30 minutes of inactivity, this page logs out. So if we sit on a page for too long or we don't move through it fast enough, it can page out. So if I sit on this page for 30 minutes, for example, it'll time out and it won't work. But I haven't been on this page for 30 minutes yet, so we're good. So we're going to do TAS plus. We're represented by an attorney because someone is filing it for us. So we click continue. It'll take us to the next page, and this is where they want the owner of the mark. So for today's example, I'm going to be filing a mark for Dana Legal Services. And basically what you see behind me here, we're going to file for the patent guru, which is not listed here, but it's one of the parts of our mark. So we're going to go after and file for that. We could just do Dana Legal Services. We could do the logo. We could do any combination of things, but we're just going to keep it simple. So we're going to say the owner of the mark is, Dana Legal Services. And it's going to ask what type of entity is it. If it's an individual, you click an individual. So look what happens here. It says what country is their citizenship. So you have to identify the country. If you say a corporation, it's going to change this field again. It's going to ask you what state is it incorporated in. If it's a limited liability company, it's going to ask you to provide again where, what state, is it in. You just basically select from one of the states here. If it's a partnership, it's going to again ask you some specific questions. And domestic applications, you need the name and citizenship of all the partners here. Again, there's limited liability, joint venture, sole proprietorship. If you click that again, the general field they give you is pretty much the same. You have to identify the state, and then you have to identify the names of the individual to the extent it's not a corporation or a limited liability corporation. If it's a trust, of course, trust can own trademarks. If it's an estate, you can click here and again, fill in the information. And of course, other is if you don't fit into one of these categories, you can specify information specific. So we're going to assume right now that this application is being filed by a corporation, Dana Legal Services. The corporation is, it wants to know what state. I'm just going to pick California right now and move on. And again, you only have to answer the first one, not the second one, because if it's not a US corporation, then you have to give the country that it's residing in. The next blank is for internal email address. That's more like your box number or some specific routing you have inside your company. Maybe this is, accounting department or accounts payable or whatever you want it to route to. The address you fill in here is the address of the entity. As you can tell, we've filled this in before on many occasions. So it's showing up here. I'm going to post it right here. Suite 117, Tigard, Oregon, and select the state, Oregon. This is where a lot of our accounting and payments go to. So we have that address, and then it wants to know the zip code 97223. This box here, you uncheck if you're providing a PO box address here and you need to provide the actual domicile address. In other words, where is the individual, especially for individuals. You need to provide that information. But if the mailing address and the domicile address is the same, you don't uncheck this box. So you leave it the same. because it's saying the domicile address is the same as what I've provided here already. Phone number, you can always provide the phone number. And of course, it wants to know a fax number. You don't necessarily have to provide that. Now, remember, these two things are not required because they're not marked with the red asterisk. You will have to provide an email address. I just put in my personal email address, coachjubin@gmail. And then the website address you can provide here. There you go. It's not required, but you can provide it. Now, I will say this, all of the information that's on here, becomes public the minute you file your application. It is public. And there are certain entities out there that try to extract funds from you, providing services to you, which are legitimate legal services, but they're unnecessary. And they will use this information on this page to send you mail that looks official, but it really is irrelevant. And as a result of that, sometimes people get fooled and they pay the fees because they want like 1,000 or 1,500 or some amount. They make it look official. They send it to this address to bypass the attorney of record and send it to the individual who typically doesn't recognize that something is not from the trademark office, but is actually just solicitation. However, if you read the forms they send you very carefully, it will make it clear that you're not required to do this, that it's a solicitation for services. So once you have all this stuff filled out and you're comfortable with it and you know that it's going to become public, then you can continue to the next step. You click continue. Now, I will warn you, if you decide that, you know, something is not right, okay, here you must specify through one of the 4 choices, the actual nature of your entry and remove the entire text. So I put the word Dana Legal Services here and it shouldn't have been, it auto-filled it. There should be nothing in there because you're not doing any of these unless you're doing a DBA, in which case you can click it and add the name in. Otherwise, if you're not doing a DBA or also known as, you just leave that blank. So that's what that error was. Now I click continue and it should take us to the next page. Yes, so now we're at the next page where it's asking for the actual mark. Now, if you suddenly remember that you did something wrong and you want to go back to the previous page, do not click your back button here on the browser. Use the go back function that they have, which will take you back to the previous page and all your data will be preserved. If you click this button, everything goes away and you have to start all over. Also note that if there are more than 1 or 2 entities, I mean, if there's more than 1 entity, so 2 or more, and you want to add an additional owner, that's what this button down here is for, add owner. Okay, so now we can continue. So this takes us to the next page. Now this wants to know the actual mark that we are filing for. So we're going to put in the patent guru. We're chasing the mark in letters and words independent of stylization, font, or appearance. Note that it doesn't want you to include SM or TM because that's not part of the mark. The mark is the patent guru, even though when we display it on web pages, and I'll switch over right now. Nicole, can you guys see the Dana Legal Services webpage?
Yes.
Okay, so if you notice here, it says the patent guru and it has SM next to it. Also note that this is all in lowercase, whereas on the application, I put it all in uppercase. I'd usually recommend that you put it in all uppercase because it is standard characters and we're not worried about whether it's a particular font or a particular size or whether it's upper or lowercase. That's what this radio button indicates. If you were going after the logo, kind of like what we have here, you would click this radio button. Now watch what happens when I click that radio button. All the information here becomes a little different. Now it wants me to attach an example of the logo itself. It wants me to write in here if there's any literal words that are in the logo. So for example, if we were to collect this whole thing, Dana Legal Services and the triangles as a logo, then I would type in here, Dana Legal Services. Oops, sorry, guys. So I would type in here, Dana Legal Services, because that appears as part of the logo and it is a literal element. In other words, it is text. If I just go after the logo and there's no text in it, I leave that blank. This next box is if I'm claiming color. And with regards to this logo, I would claim the color because that's the way we want to display it every single time. We want black with red. If there's no color, then you just leave it. And the ideal situation would be if you're going to claim no color, to make sure that your logo specimen that you provide here is actually black and white, not in color. So anyway, this is the color description. So I would say, red and black are features of the mark. You can check this box if you are not claiming color. However, you don't need to do it if you do not put anything here. It says, look at this. It says, note, check only if you believe your image is black and white, yet you receive a continue button warning. So when we hit continue and it gives you a warning, then you can come back and check it. But for right now, we're going to leave it as it is because we're not even submitting a logo. And then over here is where you describe the logo itself. So in this case, I would describe this as 3 partial triangles interleaved, wherein 2 of them are black and 1 is red, something like that. And it's an equilateral, whatever you want to do to describe the details of your logo. Remember, this is the middle of the sentence, so you don't start with a capital and you don't put a period at the end because the period is already there. If I happen to type in some information and put a period, then there would be 2 periods. And this will lead to a problem for you in terms of formality rejections. Okay, in this case, we're not doing any kind of logo or anything. We're actually doing words. Oh, by the way, you can file for a sound mark, but very few people actually do that. What would be an example of a sound mark? Sometimes people ask me, the example of a sound mark is, for those of you who stream and use Netflix, when any Netflix film or movie or show or series first starts to play, it makes a special noise as the N or the Netflix logo is put up. That's what you would claim as the sound mark. Again, if you click this, it's going to bring up a whole set of things to fill out, and you're going to have to attach a file. And of course, it tells you what type of file to attach. So just be very clear on the fact that sound marks are rare, they're not common. There's logos and special designs if you want it to be a specific way. And then, of course, if you just want the words, which is the broadest protection, you just come in and you type in the words. I remember we had the patent guru. So that's going to be our mark and our brand. At this point, I can hit continue. So I have now got the mark. Please make sure this is spelled correctly, because if you misspell this, you really can't do much about it. You'd have to file a whole new application. Now, remember, if I suddenly remembered I did something wrong and I need to go back, I use the go back button. I don't use my browser back button. So here I am back to this page. Yes, everything is right. I'm going to hit continue. Now, this is where it gets a little difficult. You have to know what goods and services you want to be associated with your mark, regardless of whether you're actually using it or you plan to use it. Of course, if you're using it, you know what goods and services are used. So I'm going to click goods and services, and it's going to take me to a page where I can now search for various types of things. And you can search for anything. I can put legal services. And the minute I hit the go button, it brings me up all of the different categories that are legal services. So, legal services related to licenses. You can do the general legal services related to everything and anything. There's all these different categories. And no matter what you put in here, it'll search for it. So, if I put software as a service, it'll bring up all the different software as a service categories. If I put in, t-shirt, it'll bring up all the different categories that are related to t-shirts. You just have to read through these descriptions and decide. And this is what we do for our clients. We talk to them, we get them to fill out a form to describe their goods and services, and then we go in and try to pick the category that suits their needs the best. So I'm going to go back to legal services. And then I'm going to pick just a generic category right here. Now, remember, I'm going to organize this by these numbers so you can see what's going on. Every one of these numbers represents a class. So there's class 35, class 36, class 41, class 42, et cetera, et cetera. The point I'm making here is if I click something in class 35, because that relates to what we do with our brand, and I click something here that relates to class 42, that is now 2 classes that I have to pay for. Remember at the initial thing, it was $250 per class. If I click 2 different classes, that's 2 times $250 I have to pay. However, if I click 3 things or 4 things in the same class, that's still 1 class I have to pay. Why would I not click all of these if it's the same cost? The reason is every one of these things that are described here as the services you're using, you're going to have to provide a specimen that shows you using your mark in that class with that description. So if you're not providing legal docketing management services and you've clicked it and your specimen doesn't support it, you're going to have a problem. The office is going to come back to you and say the specimen doesn't support the class described, either cancel the class or provide a specimen. So it's best to pick 1. If you want to pick 2, if you want to pick 3, make sure that you can support it. So if you are providing, consulting services, assisting legal professionals, then great, check that. If you're doing charitable services, check that. So you have to read what it is and then do it. Also, please note that to the extent you see the curvy brackets with bold, that is information you're going to have to type in. So I'm going to check one of these boxes that is like that and keep it so that you guys can see what it does when I want to insert these classes. So now once you've identified your classes of goods and services, remember we picked 45 legal services, and I picked this one just so I could fill it in and show you, confirming scheduled appointments for others in the field of whatever you want to do. So I now click insert the checked entry. So this is going to take this information and put it in the form for me. Remember I told you where the squirrely brackets are. I don't know what you call these things. Is that squirrely brackets or curved brackets? I'm not sure. But the minute you get into the squirrely brackets, you have to provide the information here. And you can type anything you want. So confirming scheduled appointments for others in the field of, and then I'm going to put in legal services. Of course, we don't provide that. We don't confirm schedule appointments for attorneys. We schedule appointments for attorneys, but that's not the service we provide. Now that I have this, I can say insert checked entries, and you'll see on the next page, it'll show me all of the entries I put in. So here's 35 with the words I typed in red, and of course, 45, which was already there. And the reason it's highlighted is because it was from the form highlighted. Okay, so now I've got my goods and services identified. Now let's assume that I really made a mistake. I didn't want 35. How can I get rid of it? I check it, and then I come over here and I say, remove the checked entries of goods and services. And it says, do you really want to do it? I say, yes, do it. It'll remove it, and then there'll be just this one left. Now what I have to do, I've identified my goods and services. I've identified my mark. Now, because I'm actually saying I'm using it, I have to tell the form or the trademark office I'm using it. And that's what this is, section 1A. It says actually using the mark in commerce now. This one is saying I'm not using it, but I intend to use it. So that's 1B. We're not going to click this because we've got a whole video on how to do this one. We're going to do this one because it's a little harder. So we're going to click section 1A, and look, I'm clicking it, but nothing is happening. If that happens, that means you didn't select the one mark or the class that you wanted to do. Now that I've selected it, I can go in and pick it. Now, the minute I click this, it takes me to another page and says, okay, you're using this mark, so provide a specimen. It says attach or remove specimens. So this is where you have to have the specimen loaded on your computer. So here is our web page, and you can see the mark, the patent guru, is being used. So I can take a screenshot of this page and use it as a specimen of our services. So here all our services are listed, and it clearly supports legal work. So I can use this page, a screenshot of this page, as an example of using the using the mark in conjunction with the goods and services. Now remember, the goods and services are legal services. I've already prepared a specimen. I'm going to just grab that one. Oh, I'm sorry. I have to go return to the form. I didn't tell you guys what I did. I just did it. See how it says attach specimen? I'm just clicking this radio button, and it's going to take me. Now I'm going to be able to choose a file from the computer. You know, I can go to the appropriate folder where I've got this stored. I will show you this in 2 seconds. So here are the different specimens I have. So this is the patent guru. I'm going to select that. Now notice here, it tells you that the form must be a PDF or JPEG form, and it can't exceed certain sizes. Once I've chosen the file I want as my specimen, I can attach it, and it should show up right here if it was done correctly. Yep, it's right there, it's attached. If I want to attach 5 more examples, because I've picked 5 different, you know, types of services, then I can add in other samples. If I want to show the same thing in 5 different ways, I can do it. If I want to attach a picture of my business card that uses it, then I can do it. I can do anything in terms of providing specimen. I just have to say that I'm using it. So now I've attached it. If I want to remove it, that's how I do it. Now that it's attached, I return to the form. And if you look on the form, you will now see that it says one file attached. Okay, and it says check this box if you are attaching a color specimen, but you only check this if you get a problem and the warning when we move on. You don't need to worry about it until you move on. Now it says describe the specimen. So what is the specimen? Well, the specimen I typically put in, you know, oh, sorry. I just put in shows the mark used in conjunction with the services. Oh, sorry, typo. I usually use that description unless it's got a lot of clutter in it, a lot of different things in it, then I can describe the specimen differently. But I typically say the specimen shows the mark used in conjunction with the services. If you are using it with goods, then of course I would say goods instead of services, but this is specifically for services, so I list it that way. The next box asks you if you took it from a specific web page, and yes, I did. So I would put in the web page address because the examiner will go look this up and make sure that it, you know, reflects it. And of course, what date? It is 01. What is today? The 12th? Yes. 2022. That's the day I got it. Whatever day you downloaded your specimen, that's what you would put on there, because what they want to know is, did this thing exist as of a specific date? And the answer to that is yes. Remember, here is the web page, Dana Legal Services. I'm not sure if you guys can read that, but that's the web page, and I took a screenshot of it right there. All right. Now, these next 2 questions are critically important. They ask for the first use of the mark anywhere, and then first use the mark in commerce. What is the difference between these 2? First use of the mark anywhere is basically anywhere you use the mark in the world. So you may have been using this mark in Canada for 2 years and didn't start using the mark in the US. A word that might help you. If you have a website that can be accessed from anywhere in the world, then it doesn't matter that your company was in Canada and you started using the mark in Canada, because if someone in the US can access your website, order stuff, or get access to your services, and those services can be delivered to them, that's considered in-commerce in the US because the person reaching out to you is in the US. So typically these two dates are the same. So let's say that we first started using this mark April of 2009, 2009. So that's when we started the firm. We started using these marks. Well, the patent guru, we actually didn't start using until earlier this year, but the firm itself, we started. So maybe a more accurate reflection here is to say 01/01/2020. That's for the mark, the patent guru. And that's also when we started using it in commerce. So we'll put the same date here. Again, these two dates can differ. This date typically should always be the same or before this date. So if you put this as, 2009 before this, then that may lead to issues for you. Does that make sense? I'm asking a question like you guys are interacting with me. So yeah, so here we are. If you have questions, just drop it in the chat and Nicole will interrupt me and ask. So anyway, those are the things. So now I say assign filing basis. So remember, we're talking about these services in this class, and look over here, it has no filing basis assigned. The minute I click this button, it assigns these filing bases to that, and it will put 1A right there. So let me click this. And here we are, legal services. It put 1A, and everything now is basically saying the patent guru, that's the mark, is being used for legal services. And here is when I started using it. Again, that's section 1A. Now remember, I can't click any of these because this button is not clicked. Now I can change this filing basis from 1A to 1B if I want by clicking this button, or I can leave it as it is. And if I want to go back and change things, I can certainly do that. All right, so now we can click continue. So we've got the mark, we've got the goods and services. Because we're actually using the mark, we also have specimens submitted. Now, when I click continue, it takes me to the next page, which is, remember at the very beginning, we said, hey, we are represented by an attorney. Because we said that, now it wants the attorney information. So this is where I would, enter the name of an attorney. So I'll just put my own name in. If there's a docket number, the attorney will probably put it here. Let's say that's the docket number. And then of course it wants to know the year of admission. So we can put that in here. It wants to know what state. Of course, this is California. It wants to know my registration number. My license number. And then I click here saying I'm an attorney in good standing. If there's other attorney names, I would list them there. If there's attorneys from Canada, of course, they can be listed on this line. The firm name is Dana Legal Services. And the address fills in and populates automatically because we've done this several times. And then again, remember the internal address, you don't have to worry about it on this page. However, the internal address is like this. It's the suite number or, a particular department you want that to go to. You put the street address, the city, the state, and then of course you can put in the fax number, which we have. They don't communicate with you via fax. They almost always will communicate with you via writing as well as email. And then of course it wants the email address to use. And we typically have docket@Dana Legal Services. You would put in your own email address. If you're not represented by attorney, this page would be very different. You would just skip this page. This page will not even be there for you. Then you click continue. But let me go back and keep going back to the very beginning to demonstrate to you guys what happens if you don't put an attorney. By the way, all your information is saved as long as you click the go back button. If you click that back button on there, then you're going to have a problem. All right. So if I change this to no, in other words, I'm not being represented by an attorney, and I click continue, then the form will continue, but that last page will be missing. So all the information we put in is still there. Nothing has changed, right? So we click continue here. The mark is the patent guru. We can click continue here. Again, here's the services. It's a 1A, meaning I'm actually using it. Because this radio button is there, I can click these, but I don't need to worry about it. I can click continue. And it wants a docket or reference number. This would be your own personal reference number. Did you see how it skipped that page that had all the attorney information? It's no longer there because you're not represented by an attorney. So you can put in a reference number if you want, some way that you have internal to your company that you want to reference it. You can put even a purchase order number in here. Whatever you want, you can put in here. They don't care, but it can't be any more than 12 characters. And then, of course, the email address it took. Remember at the very beginning, I put in my personal email address, coachjubin@gmail.com. That's the email address it's using for primary correspondence. And you can now add in up to 4 additional email addresses to which communications are sent. I highly recommend you put in at least one other one for somebody on your team, or a second email address that you're using. And if you have 4 email addresses of people you trust, then I would definitely include those, because any communication that comes from the trademark office will go only to the email addresses you've listed. If you just list one and you happen to miss it or not track that email very well, and then you forget about it, then you could potentially have your application abandoned. We're not going to enter any, but if you want, I can just put in, all the different team members that we have that do this. Then we just click continue. Oh, I can put in a reference number. You can just put new trademark app so that it's your trademark app, or you can say the patent guru trademark app. So it's a reference number, you know what it is, especially if you filed 3 or 4 or 5 of these. And here's the final page. Remember, we reduced it to one class 45. If I'd left 35 in there, this would be 250, and the total being 500. When you get to this page, this is where you confirm all the information. So you basically have to read all of this and check the radio boxes. I have read this so many times that I just know what it says, so I just check it, but you should take the time to read it. For example, this one says, to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, all allegations and other factual made above have evidentiary support. In other words, that statement you made that you first started using the mark on January 1st of 2020, you need to have support for that. You sign the form, and how you sign the form is /, then type in your name. It can be lowercase, uppercase, whatever. And that's considered a signature. And they give you examples here. Here they do it in lowercase. It doesn't matter whether you do it in lower or uppercase, but just to be consistent with their request, I typically do it this way as well. And if you click the tab button, it will bring you here. Click a tab again, it brings you and puts the today's date in it. Click the tab button, come over here. You just type in your name and your position. So if you're an individual, you can just say owner. If you're, someone of the company that's associated with the company, you can say CEO or whatever your title is. It has to be an official title that allows you to bind the company. So you can't be engineer. It's got to be something that indicates official position in the company and the power to bind the company. Of course, if I was filing this as an attorney, I would put in attorney of record, which is right here, State Bar California member. All right, so in this case, we're just going to say owner because I'm the owner of the mark. I can put in my phone number. I don't have to. Remember, there's no red dot. I can put in my phone number. And remember, all of this is public information. So if you don't want your personal phone number to appear here, don't put it there. Put in a general number or a general number for your company, or leave it blank. Now, when I click validate, it looks through this, takes my signature and says the form is valid. Everything is correct. Are you ready to pay and file? This is the final page. When you see this green and orange with all of these different things, this is the final page. So if you want to see what the mark looks like, you can click on that. Oh, here it is. It's spelled correctly. Again, the back button, not this back button. If you want to see what your specimen looks like, you can click that. It says here's a link to the specimen, and you can click this link and you can see your specimen. When you're done, you close that window and you click the back button. If you want to see the form and all the inputted data, you can click this. You can see everything you've inputted. Remember, we said there's no attorney, and I gave my personal email. It grabbed the personal email. You can see it right here. And if everything looks okay, I'm the owner. This is the date we're filing it. I can click again, back button. If you want to view it in a PDF or download it, you can do that. So if all of this is correct, I can hit pay, submit, and then make the payment. Now, please note that you must check this box in the red. It says it's an important notice. And basically they're telling you in here, hey, once you submit this, you're done. There's nothing you can do. All the information you submitted is going to be a public record. And private companies not associated will reach out to you and try to get you to send the money. And anytime you get something like that, you can ignore it unless it comes directly from the USPTO's database to mail or email. You will see and you will know the difference. So you check that because they're giving you this warning, and then you click pay and submit. I'm not going to click pay and submit because we've already submitted our trademark. It'll cause all kinds of confusions and problems. But again, here it says on Wednesday at this time, by the way, this is Eastern time, you're completed the mandatory fields and you're ready to go. At this point, I'm going to stop sharing and open up the floor if anybody wants to ask any questions. Nicole, I don't know if there's any questions I need to address or try to answer, but I'd be happy to do that now.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. We have one already from Daryl. If you can see.
Okay, I see the question.
Do you want to go ahead and answer?
Yeah, let me open up the chat and I can read it. So Daryl, thanks for the question. You're asking if you have an issued patent assigned to an LLC and entities are infringing the patent. Oh, does it qualify for actually using the mark? So does a patent application qualify for actual use of the mark? The answer to that is no. The reason for that is the mark must be associated or shown or displayed on the goods or on a web page of the services. So go ahead and ask your question, Daryl.
So it sounds like I could create a website for the entity and then have even the non-issued IP available for licensing, and then anything that does issue, that also be available for licensing. And would that qualify as using the mark correctly in commerce?
As long as you brand your services as, licensing services or something like that.
Okay.
If you brand your services as consulting services for business development, that may not be good enough. Because remember that the examining attorney will look at your mark to see if somebody else has registered it. And then once he's satisfied with that, she can then go on and look to see if the sample you provided matches up.
Yeah.
So it's important that the specimen supports the services or the goods you've described.
Yeah.
So yeah, having a web page that shows a patent and technology for licensing is sufficient.
So what if it was a new trademark that clears, it's uncontested, and it's deals with a graphic user interface? What kind of service or what kind of explanation would you give for the use of a product that includes a graphic user interface?
I would go, remember how we got to that one page where I put in search terms?
Yeah.
Like I put in, okay, so I would go in there and experiment with different search terms, because that's what I do. I look at the client's things. So for example, I would maybe put in graphical interface or user interface and see what kind of descriptions come up with it. Now, If you don't want to go through that process and you just want to pick the other category, which is TEAS standard, you can just type in your own services. You can just type in whatever you want. You don't have to use. So if you want to save, then you have to use one of the custom category. I mean, one of the predefined categories. If you want to pay a little more, you can create your own custom category.
I see. I see.
Remember, that was at the very beginning of the process where we, went TAS plus or standard.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And yes, I will do that. I'll look up, I'll do a
Sure.
search, and see what comes up on that.
It's a good
And
question.
then- oh, thank you.
Yeah. Shankar, you had a question too?
Yes, I do. Quick question on this one, might be a long convoluted answer, but what if you accidentally pick the wrong class of the service? For example, you do a in-use and you're doing, let's say, a software that's available for purchase, but not something that's downloadable via a website. Like, it's a complicated thing that requires installations and whatnot, but by accident you clicked a downloadable software and the specimen you submit does not support that's a downloadable software because it isn't a downloadable software from a website. It's not like it's WinZip you can go and download or Google Chrome or something. How do you go about changing the classification of it?
Very good question. Let me start by saying that the assumption we're making up front is that you're actually using the mark, so you have to submit specimens.
Right.
If you were not using the mark and didn't have to submit specimens, then that issue doesn't exist until you give your specimens. So let's assume you're using the mark, you submitted specimens, and then you pick the wrong description, so it doesn't really match up with your specimens.
Right.
In that case, the examiner can give you a rejection and say, hey, your description is inaccurate. You need to either give me an accurate description or new specimens. In which case you would go in, give the examiner a call and say, I'm thinking about this description, will that work? And then the examiner will tell you yes, in which case you then submit a response to the rejection to clarify the goods or services.
So you're saying you can potentially change the actual classification where when you
can, as long as the examiner agrees to the thing. For example, you can't change downloadable software to hats and t-shirts.
Right.
That's not the kind of change you can make because that's an entirely different class.
Correct.
Right. But you can, within that same class, modify the language to accurately reflect your services or goods.
Got it. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, Dana. That was very, very helpful.
Oh, for sure. And by the way, if you have already filed an application and you've already received the rejection, the number one thing you should always do is read the rejection. And after you've read it and digested it, call the examining attorney and say, hey, I'm looking at this rejection. I want to understand, tell them what you plan to do. And they will always talk to you about it. Now, they will always start by saying, I can't give you legal advice. That's not what we do, which is fine. Although they are attorneys, they're not supposed to give you legal advice. And of course, as an attorney, when I call them, they give me all the advice in the world because ultimately they know I'm the one giving advice to the client. So they don't have to worry about that. They're worried when they're talking to a non-lawyer.
Right. Awesome. Thank you, Jubin.
Yeah, for sure. Glad you joined us. Nicole, anybody give you questions through Facebook?
No, we're actually good here.
Okay.
And
And
we're
I don't
a
even
little
know
over
when we're
time,
supposed
so-
to wrap up. Did I go way over our time?
It's okay. It's good. It seemed like there was some value that was received. So
Yeah, I
happy
think we're
about
supposed
that.
to go for 30 minutes. I apologize. I didn't talk fast enough. I'll talk faster.
Yeah. Jubin, I had another question on if the mark is uncontested, how soon typically after you're filing it would it become registered? And I guess relating to that, can you enforce an in use but not yet registered trademark?
So two questions there. Number one, how long does it take from the time you file to the time you have the examining attorney look at it? Right now, they've been backed up about 8 months. It used to be about 3 or 4 months. Now it's about 8 months. So it takes 8 months for them to look at it. If they have any problems, they issue an office action. If they don't, they publish the mark for opposition for 30 days. So it's a 30-day period where anyone can oppose your mark for whatever reason they have. Outside of that 30-day window, then your mark will register, and it takes them about 2 to 8 weeks to process the paperwork to send you your registration.
Okay.
If it's uncontested, so you're looking at possibly up to a year before you get your registration number.
Okay.
Now, the other part of your question is enforcing your mark and using your mark. Anytime you have a mark that you're using in association with goods and services, remember I mentioned SM and TM, and don't put that as part of your thing.
Yeah.
However, on the website or on the goods or all of that stuff, you should put TM or SM. TM and SM are a designation that you are using this as a mark, and you're putting the world on notice, which
Yeah.
gives you some limited enforceable rights.
Okay.
Once it gets registered, you change the TM or the SM to an R with a circle around it, which means registered. In that scenario, when the mark is registered, you now also have, in addition to common law rights like statutory state rights, you now have federal registration rights, which is very powerful.
Mhm. Okay.
So you can enforce your mark as soon as you start using it against someone who's trying to, take it by giving them, notice through the TM and SM or writing them letters.
Yeah.
But in order for that threat to have real teeth, it's got to be registered.
Yeah. All right. That's
So
great.
yeah, you don't want your dog jumping at the burglar with no teeth, just numbing you want your dog to have some teeth.
Oh, thank you
There's
very much.
no other questions. I think we can wrap up. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for your support. And if you have any questions, feel free to follow up. Nicole, I think, is there a general email address that people can send information or questions to?
Yep, info@Dana Legal Services is always an easy way to get in contact with us. We're also at the Patent Guru on Instagram, and at the Patent Guru as well on YouTube, where I will post this video. So if you want to catch up on it, it will be posted on our YouTube channel and you can rewatch it. Okay,
All right.
Excellent.
thanks everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem at all.
Take care.
You too.
Thanks, everyone. It was wonderful.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.